Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about sieges in Total War Warhammer 3. We've gotten a siege rework, as it has been called. Though it's not really a rework, it's changing some things around, changing the balance a bit in the sieges, but it's not a rework. It doesn't fundamentally change the way sieges are played in any way, actually. And what's interesting to think about with Creative Assembly's decisions is that they have stated publicly in their patch notes that what ends up happening in a campaign situation, this is a skirmish battle, it's on very hard battle difficulty without realism and without this extra stats, but what they've stated is that from an attacker-defender perspective, 70% of minor settlement battles are fought by the player as an attacker with 30% as the defender. 87% of walled settlement battles, so these kind of battles, are fought by the player with only 13% fought by the AI. So basically, the players in general are only finding themselves in a defending situation in 30% of cases. Though this does match how the AI behaves, because the AI is going to be very, very reluctant to siege any of your settlements in a campaign, major settlements, minor settlements, and that doesn't, the way I read it, that doesn't necessarily reflect how many of these battles people are manually fighting. Some people may have misread that, maybe I'm misreading that, but the changes Creative Assembly made, and they clearly state this in their patch notes, those changes are made to make the battles more enjoyable for the player when you are the attacker. And I look at the changes they made and I'm like, that's absurd. Like, if you're making the sieges better for the attacker, keep in mind that, remember that point. If you're making the sieges more enjoyable for the attacker, then what exactly was Creative Assembly thinking with that? I don't think they were thinking much at all about it. Here's what I think happened, realistically speaking. Because here's what they've done. They've increased the amount of HP, especially on higher level settlements, for walls. But you do need the structure. You do need the structure for it, so you need the garrison. But you've increased the HP on fort walls, fort towers, gates, barricades, and buildable towers. They have added the benefit that barricades and towers that you destroy stay destroyed. That is certainly a benefit, I'm not going to lie, if you're playing an attacker, because the constantly respawning barricades and towers are really frustrating to tackle, right? But increasing the wall of all of them is absolutely not making things more enjoyable for the attacker. On top of that, they've also done other things as well. So they've made these objectives linked. So if you want to win a siege battle by capturing objective points, you need to take the key building, and then you take the victory location, and that's how you win. They've also added more barricade locations tied to points. So, like over here, you might see more barricade locations. But very few of those things are going to make these battles more enjoyable for an attacker in the current dynamic that we do have in sieges. There's a couple of reasons behind that. I'm going to go over this. I have a battle as Belegar with an early game army. Yes, early game. You can genuinely get this army by, turn 10, really. Maybe a bit slower, but genuinely, if you're playing Belegar, you might have some Thunderers here, some better army variety, but this is really the good dwarf early game army. Bunch of Grudge Throwers, bunch of Quarrelers with great weapons, regular Quarrelers. These are silver rank shields. Honestly, I could have gone with our ranks. It wouldn't have mattered a damn thing. And obviously Belegar's heroes. The guy defending this is going to be Skarsnik. So imagine an early game situation about turn 20, Skarsnik against Belegar, the kind of armies they would have. I want to be very clear on this, that if I had Skarsnik army under the control fighting against Belegar, I'd crush him in this situation. If I was playing the siege defensively. Hell, even offensively, that's not necessarily a problem. Without abusing the stock of the stock ability of the Nasty Skulker. So he's going to have Nasty Skulkers, he's going to have Stone Trolls, he's going to have the Sarthian Ragnarok, a Shaman, a Goblin, Big Boss, all that kind of stuff. So it's basically a tier 3 army versus a tier 2 dwarf army, which makes sense. Greenskin have an incredible amount of growth. The AI has an incredible amount of growth as well, especially on Legendary. I will annihilate Skarsnik's army, and while I talk about what the issue is and how Creative Assembly didn't fix a fucking thing. In fact, they have made certain things worse. But my perspective is they're not really balancing things out and implementing these because their developers have thought this was necessarily a great idea with proper design. What they're really doing with this patch is they're thinking to themselves, and this is what I suspect, they're thinking to themselves, oh, we're very unpopular right now amongst large sections of the community, so what do? Well, let's release a patch with certain things that are in very popular mods. Because I'm pretty certain, if I remember correctly, though I haven't played it as much, but I'm pretty certain SFO also has greater HP of walls, gates, towers, etc. So they're basing it off that. They're copying what SFO is doing without necessarily considering the implications of their decisions. That's the first thing. And they're certainly copying the one-button reset skills mod and implementing it in the base game. That's what the reason I'm saying that CA is taking things from mods. I wouldn't necessarily say that if it was just HP, but when you clearly see them taking a mod and making it the baseline experience in the game, yeah, CA is just copying what things are done in mods. So let's start the siege before I continue talking about this. Now, here's the problem, the fundamental problem, and what CA doesn't understand. When you're playing a camp, and why anyone who comments on sieges needs to understand this. You are not playing sieges in a vacuum. No battle and campaign is fought in a vacuum. They are fought within the context of the campaign. And they should be designed in such a way that they're enjoyable in the context of that campaign. So what do you do when you're playing a campaign in Total War Warhammer 3? Well, you've got this objective. You want to win every battle as quickly as possible. So Creative Assembly and a lot of marketing videos, they showcase this idea, oh, we're going to build rams, we're going to build towers, we're going to siege a settlement. That is a stupid way to play. There's no justification. And look, let me tell you this. If we didn't have siege attacker and we had to wait a turn, that's all I'd do. I'd wait a turn, build 1 or 2 battering rams, and smash the gates. That's all I do. Even if we didn't have the ability of destroying the gates with our units in melee, that is exactly what I do. Because doing anything else in a campaign is absolutely stupid for you as a player to do. It's not a good playstyle, and this applies in every Total War game. It's not exclusive to Warhammer 3, to be clear. It's not exclusive to this. It applies in Medieval 2, Shogun 2, and all the games since then. We have these periods of Total War. We have Rome 1, Medieval 2, we have Empire leading up to Shogun 2, and we've had everything since Rome 2. Every single game in Total War since Rome 2 is built on the framework of Rome 2 and Attila, including Warhammer, actually especially Warhammer. Sure, there are things other games have taken from Warhammer, like the legendary lords that were taken into Three Kingdoms and also Troy, but for the most part, the fundamentals of gameplay were built on Rome 2, so we have these 3 distinct periods, but in every single one of these periods, this dynamic in a campaign versus battle does apply. Wasting more than 1 turn, and even then if you're just forced to build some very basic equipment to storm gates, is a surefire way to end up in a significantly weaker position on a campaign. Winning settlements, taking territory very quickly is the way to play a campaign in virtually every strategy game, really. Achieving a dominant position on a campaign map. Playing a defensive, passive playstyle is not going to work. So wasting time, laying siege to a settlement is a surefire way to lose. That's the one thing to mention. And so because of that, and I know I've dragged this on, but because of that dynamic, which does exist, and it cannot be ignored, should not be ignored, and the game should be designed around that, but because of that dynamic, what needs to be mentioned, I'm pretty sure they also nerfed tower range, I might add. But regardless, but because of that dynamic, we're in this situation when we're playing these siege battles, we want to minimize casualties. We want to take these settlements in a single turn. We want to minimize our casualties. And so when you know that you're going to have a lot of sieges in a campaign, and you know they're going to present the biggest challenge from an auto-resolve perspective, because your army will take the most casualties if you try not to resolve sieges as any faction, then you're going to probably build that army around that, and also, of course, good enough to be able to deal with field battles, because you're not going to be able to ignore that. So it leads to situations like this, where the HP of the walls, the barricades, all the changes they made there are rather meaningless. So, because what I'm just going to do here, I'm going to take my grudge throwers, take down the wall tower, then move my quarrelers. I'm not even going to destroy the walls. I'm not going to climb the walls. I'm not going to do anything, then destroy the towers. And I don't even need to destroy that tower, I might add. So, all I'm going to do, take all my units here, destroy that 4 towers so I can spread my units up a bit more. If I didn't have artillery, it wouldn't matter in this type of settlement, but if I was dealing with, say, a high elf settlement type, or regardless of where you position your army initially, you can't avoid getting hit by some wall towers, I just mass my units on a very particular section where I'd be hit by as few towers as possible. Depends on the settlement type, of course, depends on the tower coverage, but I position my units to take as little damage as possible from these wall towers, destroy these wall towers if I can. If I can't, drive the units from the top of the wall towers with ranged mass. If I don't have ranged, I'll storm the gates, destroy the walls if I have like an army ability like the Warriors of Chaos, destroy the gates, destroy any wall that I can, and just march my way through 1, maybe 2 gates. It depends on the enemy army. If there's a full proper army along with the garrison there, massing behind the gates, probably seek to open in 2 places up. Flanking maneuver, like if you're playing Akari, for instance, or any army with low armor on units, or if you have stealth units, then yeah, you'd be looking to open 2 places in the wall. That's what you do. That is the siege strategy. So everything that CA did has no real relevance. The vast majority of the fighting is going to take place at the gates and the walls. And if you get in force beyond the gates and walls, the barricades, the towers inside the settlement, they're meaningless. In fact, they're not even meaningless. They're useless, more or less. Oh, sure, the towers can do a bit of damage, but it's never going to be substantial enough damage, especially now that they've nerfed the range on that, which I suppose you could consider a benefit there, but it's never going to be substantial enough damage. The barricades are really annoying to deal with because, well, look at the tooltip. It's like, allows defending infantry to climb over it. You know what the problem is with the barricades allowing you to do that? What the AI will do, being annoying as they are, is they'll send a unit to attack through the barricade, a unit that's trying to destroy the barricade, and you end up in this situation where you can't order your unit to attack the unit that's basically on the barricade, because they'll try and go all around, or they'll just get stuck. So you're just kind of like, the units will, like, they'll kind of get stuck over there. And that's annoying. Now, it's probably going to be less annoying in some extent because you don't have, because while barricades have more HP, they at least stay destroyed and can't be rebuilt. Fair enough. But really, it doesn't matter that much, regardless whether or not they can be rebuilt. Like, you'd never really want to attack at the barricade directly unless you have absolutely no choice. Like over here, yeah, I have no choice. Okay. Would I destroy both barricades? Maybe. Or would I go all the way around over here? Yeah, maybe that. You know, capture the victory point, remove the barricade there, instead of just wasting my time and actually losing a lot of troops in the process trying to attack a barricade because of the bugged unit behavior that does occur. I don't know if that's ever been fixed. I don't believe it ever was fixed, but yeah, it certainly is a frustrating situation. Ooh, spell coming in. That matters. Not that that matters over there. So over here, let's just speed it up because there's nothing to talk about. Like over here, what's gonna end up happening is my massive quarrelers are just going to annihilate everything here with minimal casualties. And I kind of just screwed that up because I moved in range in that tower, didn't realize. Okay, let's actually destroy that. So now they're just going to start taking shots. In fact, I was pretty surprised that they weren't already shooting at a lot of these units. Yeah, that's kind of an annoying thing. This is not fun. This is not fun. And the problem I have with the changes is increasing the HP of things. Increasing the HP of things does not change this dynamic. It just makes them more annoying. It also negatively affects races that don't have the ability of bringing artillery to destroy the walls, even more than it did before. And even as the dwarves right now, I'm kind of starting to wonder, okay, if like towers and walls have significantly more HP, and then is there any real value in me even recruiting grudge throwers or artillery? I mean, sure, something like an organ gun would be useful in field battle. Grudge throwers, kinda not so much. But regardless, you see what's happening, right? This is the siege strategy. You bring your lord, your heroes beyond the walls, lure the enemy units to attack your units just behind the wall. Your mass of ranged units just obliterate everything there. That's the siege strategy. Everything that CA did is utterly pointless. And if you're playing a melee-centric faction, you just do this again. Like, you just literally use this strategy. You just smoosh, you just blob all your units up beyond the gate. You just blob all your units up beyond the gate. And beyond the gate. And if you're like Warriors of Chaos, and if you're a very strong melee faction, you're probably powerful enough. You're probably playing a faction powerful enough to deal with most armies. And look, what if I run out of ammunition? Oh, what if the enemy decides to take position in a formidable situation where maybe they'd force me into unfavorable choke point battles? Well, withdraw. Like, you don't, like, worst case scenario, you withdraw. If you have enough movement points, go back and again and attack it. If you don't have movement points, well, that might be a problem. Or you'll run out the timer, sure. But, I mean, like, that's one of the things. One of the strategies, like, at most, a siege should take you 2 turns. Ideally, 1 turn to win. Maybe 2 turns if there's an entire army in there. But what you should be doing is like weakening the enemy every time you go, doing as much damage, and then we're going to end up in this ping pong. I might add over here that I've killed like 500 of their troops already. And this isn't a greenskin settlement, so just so we're clear. Like, oh, but you might run out of ammunition. Again, just withdraw or use abilities like this, replenish ammo. Because like the problem is, why is the AI so bad? Why is defending so hard? Is it just because the AI is bad? No. While the AI is certainly playing this the wrong way, and anyone who's like thinking, oh, I'll just fight on a portion of the battlefield, a couple of units, and hold on choke points, that will not work. I mean, it might work to delay an advance by the enemy, to be clear, but if you're thinking that fighting with 1 unit at a time in a choke point is going to win you a battle, especially against an overwhelming force, it won't. Because Total Warhammer, like war itself, a lot of battles historically were won. Siege battles, open field battles, it doesn't matter. It was won by finding an opening in the enemy's lines. It can be in a settlement. It doesn't matter. It can be in a settlement. It can be in their formation on the field of battle. That's particularly relevant. By the way, most of the enemy army here is probably gone. Yep, it's mostly gone. And now we get this annoying ping pong situation where I'm going to just take some extra casualties. And by the way, like, I could have done this better, right? If I had advanced more slowly, all that. There we go. Victory. So much for the towers and barricades. You never want to engage them. You never want to deal with that system. It's a crap system. I would say that, you know what the better thing is to do to enjoy these sieges more as the attacker? Just disable them for a mod, because there is a mod that disables the ability of using these. They're not even that beneficial for you as a defender unless you're just like thing is, it's about local superiority of forces. So if you're playing the defender, well, if you have evenly matched forces, what the fuck are you doing in a settlement? If you're outnumbered, the key to victory if you're outnumbered in a siege battle is you leave enough forces on certain fronts to delay the enemy. They won't win, they'll lose, they'll be wiped out, but that's not important. You throw some disposable units, or as close to disposable as they are, to delay the enemy. Hopefully they just rout and you'll be able to replenish them later. But you concentrate your main combat power in certain sections of the battlefield to win. This is why attacking on multiple gates can be risky. This is why massing all your troops and blobbing up on one gate and whatever openings in the wall you can get. This is also why, you know what's pointless? And I'll tell you what is completely and utterly pointless that a lot of people obsess on. Oh, you know, they should remove it. Let me tell you this. If you're a player and you ever do this, let me just show this. If you're a player and you ever do this, what I'm about to do here, then you're not playing the game correctly. If you ever use these fucking wall ladders that so many people have a fucking problem with, you are just going to get a lot of your guys killed. Because guess what you're going to do? Sending units at a time like this where the formation is broken and it's only in 1 or 2 units on a section of the wall allows the defender to concentrate their forces so you can wipe them out. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Same why wall towers are useless. Open breaches in the wall and throw a lot of units at once, because that's the thing with breaches in the wall. That's the difference. You can throw 4 units of Warriors of Chaos in a single wall that's been destroyed, or 4 Quarrelers that are pretty decent melee units. That's the reason you want to go with Quarrelers if you're playing the Dwarves. Only get Dwarf Warriors and Miners with Blasting Charges if you cannot recruit Quarrelers yet. So basically when you have tier 1 settlements. Belgar starts with the tier 2 Miner settlement, just so you know. So that's the victory. Now, let's go over, let me do a role reversal on this. Let me play as the defender as Skarsnik. I wiped the floor with him, took minimal casualties. Fun fact though, Skarsnik's army is actually, what is it? The one I'm looking, no, it's S2. Okay. So Skarsnik's army over here can wipe the floor with Belegar's army. It's not even going to be a contest. So map setup, same situation, attacker, defender, tier 4 settlement. So let's go with that and show you how you win. Based on the principle I talked, concentration of force, wiping the enemy out on a local level. Once you win on a certain flank of the enemy, the force, you go to the other flank. This is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons why the way sieges play out heavily favor the attacker. Because you dispersing your force, because one, if you're fighting outnumbered, let's say the enemy has 3 stacks, you only have 1. If you spread your 1 stack out trying to defend everything, you're just going to get wiped out on every side. If you don't concentrate forces on one flank, delay on the others, you're going to lose, right? Now, Belegar will not outnumber me here, right? But let me just showcase how I would deal with it. Now, as the defender, there's a couple of problems in what Creative Assembly did. Changes very little, or if they are changing things, they're not making these battles more enjoyable. Though keep in mind, their priority was to make battles more enjoyable for the attacker. Clearly, that has failed. Because taking ideas from mods is not necessarily going to deliver success without understanding the greater context of those mods. If you're just taking one idea from a mod, or something people have proposed otherwise, without consideration, it's not going to work well. So just increasing HP of walls and gates and all that, if you build a structure using a building slot, well, you're using a building slot that could be spent elsewhere, and it's not going to change the dynamic of this situation by much. The only thing that you might get from a building is you improve the damage your wall towers can do. And let's be clear, wall towers can annihilate armies because the AI is pretty stupid. But let's just consider the unit situation. To win battles, you want to achieve local superiority of forces to do as much damage. The AI spreading its forces around as much is a really, really bad idea that will get them killed. In this case, they certainly will get killed. So, you trying to fight in choke points outside of a delaying tactic is a really bad idea. There's value in choke points, of course. Delaying the enemy on a flank so you can focus on others. That's the purpose barricades can serve. That's the purpose towers can serve. But it's generally better to, if you're going to build towers or barricades, it's generally better to focus on building them in a kind of choke point on a section of the battlefield where you know the enemy's going to break through. So over here, I could concentrate on Belegar, I could concentrate on this third force here and build choke points otherwise, right? Just for delaying. They're not going to win. That will not win you the battle alone, but you can delay the enemy, and that's the important thing. delaying the enemy, splitting them off, defeating them in detail, as it's called. So, how would I fight this battle if I didn't have powerful towers? Well, I certainly wouldn't sit my ass on the walls. That's a waste of time. He has artillery, he's got quarrelers. My ranged units over here, like the units on the walls have great range, the units behind the walls don't. So any attacker with range units can just focus on certain units on the walls, annihilate them, and if others take their place, they'll do the same with that. This is the reason why ranged units on the walls are bloody useless, even if they fired properly. It was different in Warhammer 2. In Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 1, if I'm not mistaken, but in those games, the defender on the walls had a significant damage reduction against range attacks. So it was actually kind of worth holding the walls, but even in that game, it was not really all that much. But at least there was some value here with like range units dueling with other range units. In Warhammer 3, because you cannot concentrate your massive range units, it is not. Like if it's even numbers, okay, the greater range will help. But if it's greater numbers for the attackers in particular, or even like even numbers overall between the armies, there's no real worth to it. If the AI wasn't stupid. Since the AI is stupid, there's obviously some value in doing it, but that's just abusing the AI stupidity. So that's one of the problems, and same with like splitting off your forces inside the settlement. That's one of the problems with defensive sieges, barricades, towers. They serve a purpose, but it doesn't lead to great gameplay. Your army, for the most part, this is not a joke, your army may be more effective in a lot of field battles, in the most genuine sense. Like my army over here, if I try and hold deep inside the settlement, will be significantly less effective than if I decide to fight outside the settlement. And it doesn't necessarily matter that Belegar has a lot of range units. In fact, that would actually help me inside the settlement, because lines of fire, arcs of fire, and all that, they would be less effective. But going outside the settlement and deploying in a proper formation, massing my units on a section of the battlefield, that is the key to win a battle. So this is what I'm going to do. I've got Vanguard deployment. I've got a lot of melee units. I'm going to charge him directly. Playing defensively is just a surefire way of losing. But I might be waiting over here, so let's just speed it up. Like, in historical sieges, the defenders would sally out, would raid, would put pressure on the enemy, would try and do this, right? Defeat certain sections of the enemy, eventually force them to withdraw. Hiding behind the walls has never worked in the history of warfare. There's very few sieges, actually I can't really think of any siege in history where the defender won, or when I say won, where the defender annihilated the attacker. The defender annihilated the attacker because the attacker was so stupid enough to break through. Like in the vast majority of examples in history, what ended up happening, the battle would be decided. Like if the attacker would force open the walls, that would kind of be it. Like look at the siege of Constantinople, for instance. Like the battle was decided when the walls were taken. That was it. Like once the Ottomans secured an entry point in the city, that was game over. And yeah, Belegar's army is effectively gone over here. So let's go chase down some units that may have split off. Let's kill Belegar. That is it. Like remember what Belegar's army under my control just did. Now that's an AI control issue, but you can either improve the AI, or you can make it so you can either improve the AI or you can make the game mechanics so that the AI is going to be able to handle things better. Now, the AI is wasting its time climbing the walls. That is wonderful. By the way, it's wonderful because it's like leaving them vulnerable and making them more like a less effective force. But that's it. Like that's GG. Belegar is gone. That's a gentleman. Oh, he turned my tower against me. Wonderful. Belegar, I love it. That's it. Really, it's not even funny. He's dead. My other units will deal with it. The problem with the greater increase in HP for the walls, it's actually going to make it harder for the AI to be an attacker. Though that was certainly something you could exploit before. But it depends solely on one thing. The types of fort towers that you have. The types of wall towers that you do have. That is it. Nothing else really matters. And giving them increased HP when the AI was pretty bad at destroying walls and wall towers, is that going to change anything for the AI when it's attacking a settlement? Not really. Like, one campaign I was playing as a Leafanar, and anyone who's played that campaign in Warhammer 3 will understand the dilemma he has. You've got a lot of enemies that will attack you from the sea. So Hellbron will do it. Sigvald may do it if he defeats Hellbron. Sigvald may do it. Be'lakor certainly will, right? So that's one dynamic that's going to happen in that particular campaign. Now, of course, you've got other things. You've got other priorities. You want to wipe out Malekith, you all that. You can't sit on your ass and just deal with constant sieges. It's a way to lose. Like, people have sent me campaigns asking, okay, how do I deal with this, right? Gosh. You gotta love the AI just like, we will climb the walls and take your walls. That's a wonderful experience. Okay, I'll give them that much. They turned my own wall towers against me, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter in any way. Look at the damage of my force. And by the way, this is a kind of squishy force. Like, if Belegar is playing properly, yeah, that's it. Game over. Battle's done. This entire force was wiped out, largely by the towers over here, not even the ranged units. It's just the Belegar's heroes. One unit of stone trolls took some damage, but that's it. Belegar's mighty army with the more experienced units. I might add, if you're playing Belegar in this kind of context, the Runesmith alone can win the battle. You know, one thing to also mention is one of the problems that we have with ladders, like one of the reasons you never want to use ladders on the walls is because it breaks the pathfinding on the walls. Like, never go on, and same with siege towers. Don't ever use siege towers or ladders, because you're just gonna make your life fucking miserable, actually, because like units will ignore the open gate and instead will ignore the open gate, and instead they will go like, okay, so he's being annoying over there. Okay, fair enough. Let's deal with Lun. Once a loser, always a loser. So let's tackle that. Finish his immortal heroes that aren't breakable, because yeah, the battle is over. GG. That's pretty much it. Like, I didn't even bother using my abilities here really all that much. Let's just finish this. So yeah. Maybe I'm just getting things wrong. I don't understand why people think like improving HP of walls, because mods have done it. I've never understood the concept of how that improves sieges. It does, like if you're the player, it just means your artillery is less worth it, and it actually pushes towards you more towards the tactics that I've displayed here, which are not fun. Like, I want to stress this out. This is the reason I hate sieges. They are not fun. If you think massing your army and just shooting everything or blobbing all your melee units at the gate is in any way a fun experience gameplay-wise, it is not. It is not fun in any way. And if you think it's fun going for a loading screen to use stealth units to take victory points, that is not fun at all, either. So what would I change personally to make these siege battles better? Because all the changes that I've seen being added in the game so far, be it ideas from mods or ideas they created themselves, have done absolutely nothing. The same dynamic we've had from the launch of the game is still the same dynamic we have today. For walled sieges. For minor settlements, obviously things have changed, though I would like them to change the auto-resolve result for that. That's the first thing I would say that needs to be changed. If you're approaching with a giant army of a Legendary Lord, or if a Legendary Lord for either you or the AI attacks a settlement, and it's a full-blown stack, and it's just a garrison, yeah, you'll annihilate them. There's no chance that garrison is going to win. There's no chance that garrison should win. I think that's a bad idea in itself. So I think the auto-resolve should reflect that. Instead of the current situation that we have, where any settlement, minor settlement, major settlement, just creates such an auto-resolve benefit that any attacker is going to take enormous damage. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of army we're talking about. Basically, that means it's not worth fighting sieges as the defender, and it forces you as the player to fight every attacking siege battle. That's one thing to mention. That's one of the main things I would like to see changed. If I think that alone would make things far less frustrating as sieges, because it would mean the sieges you would fight would be the sieges where you feel you might get a better result than auto resolve. That's one thing. When you're forcing people to fight sieges that they know they're gonna win, they know they're gonna annihilate the enemy. That is not a great campaign experience. It's one of my main problems in the game. Also, please stop tying the auto resolve result to the difficulty level. It has no actual bearing on it in either field battles. Like, if you want to tie the auto resolve result to anything in battles, it should be tied to the AI stats modifier, if anything, because that's actually going to have far more consequences for battles than the battle difficulty. Now, why would you want to play on high battle difficulty? Let me explain that. Because it changes the AI behavior. The AI is much better on aggression, conquering territories, and using the resources it has on very hard battle difficulty than lower difficulty. So if you're playing on normal, you're not... The way the AI behaves on very hard is a very different experience, I have to say. That's one of the things to mention. That's something I would change. Like the odd result tied to battle difficulty... And also, at least when one of your army engages the enemy, not between the AI themselves. That's a different situation. Maybe that's an entire argument that could be had. That maybe the AI aggression shouldn't be dependent on... Maybe the AI aggression on the campaign map shouldn't be tied to the battle difficulty you have. Maybe that the aggressiveness of the AI should be tied to what it properly should be, the campaign difficulty. I don't know what to tell you, right? That, because it's certainly a problem. Like, I guess I understand why they're doing it in a certain way, because the AI is stupid enough as it is, where it attacks in situations where it can't win, or retreats in situations where it can't lose. It's kind of crazy to see those in terms of the auto resolve result, not in terms of like how things would actually handle in the battle. So that's something I would change with respect to that. That's the main thing. The second thing is, I would say, stop looking at mods as solutions to your problems without fully understanding the consequences or the context in which these mods operate. Because just giving towers and gates and barricades more HP is a pretty bad idea in general in any mod. And yes, mods can have really bad ideas. Pretty certain SFO does it. It's a bad idea. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't make these sieges more enjoyable. It's one of the main reasons I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in SFO. Well, there are other reasons. That's one thing to mention about that. To mention about the particular thing. And when we're talking about this, Creative Assembly, I think, just needs to consider like the garrisons. Like beyond the auto-resolve result, beyond the situation where like how useless range units are on walls, how massing units, how fighting in settlement is useless for a defender, how you'd be better off concentrating your force and trying to destroy a portion of the army, that might give you a better result. Beyond that aspect, I feel CA really needs to redesign the garrison system, make garrisons weaker by default, but something you can update more manually. Maybe for a building when the context of Warhammer 3, but Medieval 2, I feel, had the best garrison system in the game. Or even Shogun 2 had a better garrison system based on the one we have right now, or the precursor to what we have right now. Because in Shogun 2, you certainly could get powerful garrisons, or decently powerful garrisons in settlements, though certainly nowhere near this level of bullshittery where you get entire stacks of troops. Though it's useless to have entire stacks of troops, because without the lore to lead them, without experience on these units, they're just going to fall. Like, they're going to collapse. It just forces you to fight these battles manually, just because, yeah, a lot of troops are going to count in the auto-resolve, even if the way the auto-resolve works against settlements changes, but a huge army, yeah, that's going to count in auto-resolve. But here's the history about the garrison system, because it comes from mods and should give you an idea of why taking ideas from mods is not necessarily the best decision. Back when I was playing Medieval 2, this is when I first noticed it. It might have predated it, but this is when I noticed it. And it continued with Empire, continued to do it, Napoleon and Shogun 2. I think even Darth Mod had it. Radius Total War certainly had it. But in Medieval 2, Third Age Total War. Third Age Total War is a great mod. The way it handled garrisons was really bad. Why is that? Well, one of the things they did in that mod is when you attack the settlement, fairly certain, I'm not certain if it was just major settlements or all settlements, but it certainly happened in major settlements. So Minas Tirith, Blackgate, Barad-dûr, Minas Morgul, those kind of Edoras, Helm's Deep, etc. What would happen when you attack those settlements? Well, in Medieval 2, garrisons were not something that you just had automatically. You had to build them. So you had to station troops there. Now, typically the AI would not leave its settlements undefended, but both you and the AI would you had a couple of slots with free upkeep. What you do is fill them up. And if you wanted to station an entire army in a city, you could certainly do so, obviously, but you would not exceed the size of 20 units in a settlement. That's one of the things of how things work. This is where Third Age Total War and other mods really went down the stupid route. And again, before you start criticizing me for daring to touch the holy grail of Third Age Total War, I put in thousands of hours into that mod. I love it in a lot of ways, but this was one of the things that was a really bad decision by the developers. What would happen when you attacked the settlement? There was a script, the garrison script, which would spawn a defending army in that settlement. So if you were marching on Minas Morgul or Barad-dûr or Minas Tirith, there might be 1 or 2 units that the AI had put there, but when you attacked it, when you laid siege to it, suddenly an entire endgame army would spawn there. So we're talking things like trolls, which were very difficult to kill, all that. That made those sieges fucking frustrating as hell. I understand the intent of the developers, and this is, by the way, why taking ideas from mods and implementing in the game without understanding the context is a really bad idea as well. I understand the intent of the mod developers. The AI was really stupid. It couldn't form a coherent campaign plan for shit. So, and because they couldn't fix that as modders, they sought to make a way where you can just steamroll Mordor as Gondor within a couple of turns. Now, obviously, that was not ideal from my perspective, the way they designed it in particular. And to be clear, you wouldn't steamroll Mordor in a couple of dozen turns unless you're playing on low difficulty. If you're playing on a higher difficulty, yeah, good luck dealing with the armies of Mordor on the open field, when you've also got the armies of Harad, which are a problem that you have to tackle as well. But while I think the idea was bad if it was designed from the perspective of like, oh, we want to make siege battles really challenging, that was a really stupid idea. And it's based on this idea, oh, we want to embrace like a more passive playstyle than an aggressive playstyle, and it's really frustrating when you have such artificial increases in difficulty. That was my perspective. So the developers there were thinking of artificial increasing the difficulty. That was a really crap way of doing it from that perspective. Of course, one of the main intentions behind the garrison script is like, why do people play the Lord of the Rings mod? They want to recreate Helm's Deep. They want to recreate Minas Tirith. They want to have the Battle of the Black Gate. They want to attack Minas Morgul and have an epic battle, not just steamroll over 1 or 2 units. That was the main intention there. That was the intent. It worked. Personally, I just used the mod that removed the garrison script. You see, a mod for a mod. But that's the context that existed there. What happened after with Empire? Well, Empire started having garrisons and settlements and cities. They were just militias. They were not great units. But modders took that idea and modified those units, added more of them, added actual troops. I believe Darth Mod did it, Radius did it, all that. If Radius existed for Empire. Certainly did for Shogun 2. And this continued in Napoleon. It continued in Shogun 2. So suddenly, you have the situation where both you and AI, compared to Medieval 2, where only the AI would get it with the garrison script when you attack their settlements. What ended up happening with Empire, Napoleon, Shogun 2, you had a lot of mods adding full-blown armies as garrisons. This, of course, was also to help with one of the issues that did exist in Empire and Napoleon, that you could just take Paris or London in a couple of turns and wipe out the British Empire or the French Empire in like a couple of turns. I certainly have done this myself when playing the default version of Napoleon Total War. I marched through Ireland and Scotland and then annihilated the British in London. Took it. Won the campaign. I sent Ney over there anyway. With Marshal Ney, Conqueror of London. So, because of that problem in Empire, that obviously impacted Napoleon Shogun 2. People wanted to prevent that because it certainly could be done. Like if you could take Kyoto early on in a campaign in Shogun 2, you're set more or less in that campaign. And you can certainly do it. Play the Hattori, you can do it, 2 turns, something like that. It's possible. So people wanted to prevent that. And this is where it continued with Rome 2, Attila, where we started getting, Creative Assembly jumped on this, gave us proper garrisons. Like they had already done so in Shogun 2, but reinforced that. Then we get to the massive garrisons of Warhammer, based on an idea that modders had originally used to solve the problem of bad AI in Medieval 2, or the abuses that people could use in Empire. But this is a problem with Creative Assembly. They use these ideas in games that had those specific map issues and those specific gameplay specific gameplay context, and they use solutions that modders were using for a purpose in specific games, and they keep those ideas that were, honestly, I think they were bad even back then, but you keep them in games where they don't necessarily make sense. I'm not against the idea of garrisons. I would, however, say that the default garrisons should be far smaller. A settlement with just a garrison should be a cakewalk. You should be forced to actually devote resources to defending settlements. That is my perspective. So the garrison of Altdorf over here should be reduced by default. It should be reduced by default. Or maybe the garrisons of specific cities like this should be bigger, but not minor settlements. Certainly a settlement should not have 7 units in it by default. Because obviously when you're accounting for armies that might be stationed there, it does make things annoying. So, but you could supplement a garrison if you wanted to with units. Units that may have free upkeep or lower upkeep. We already have this mechanic in the game. We already have the mechanic of where you station a unit in a settlement. Like you look at Black Arcs and you look at Ogre Camps, we already have the principles of it. Like you can station units in a settlement or in a mobile fleet like the Black Arcs, but you can station units and reduce the upkeep of units while they're playing defensively. And if you want to take them to concentrate more force, you can also do so. That would be one way of doing it. Create a more dynamic campaign experience. Of course, the problem there would be what would the AI do, right? Maybe a hard script to force the AI to put some units, but that would be my perspective. Or if you want a good garrison in a settlement for buff you the AI, just tie more units to the garrison building. Like that's one of the things I would do. Like reduce the baseline garrison, tie more units to the garrison building, the walls over here. That's one of the things that I would personally do in this kind of situation. That's my perspective on it, on what Creative Assembly could do. I really feel we need to go back to the system we had in Medieval 2, though perhaps with more free upkeep slots, that could work better. Though I also think Pharaoh has an interesting idea where you have like those outposts, you can station units there. Like, this is a credible thing, like literally Total War Pharaoh has a kind of solution for this. Settlements still have their own garrisons, but you can improve those garrisons. And those garrisons are, by the way, pretty weak, the default garrisons in Pharaoh. But you can station units in forts. Oh, the AI does love doing that. Now, of course, the sieges in Pharaoh are pretty crap. Like that, the garrison situation will not solve anything. The defender needs to have genuine strength on the defense, and not just the leadership benefit, I want to add. But one of the problems with giving protection to ranged units on the walls is like how the hell do you balance it when you've got factions like the Wood Elves, which rely heavily on ranged units, or High Elves, which until later stages of the campaign rely on that. That would be one of the main questions, how you'd balance it. And as we've seen plenty of times, Creative Assembly is pretty bad at balancing the various races in Warhammer 3. Like, there's fundamental issues quite a few races have in this game that have not been fixed in over a year. So a major redesign would not work, but what they've done has fixed nothing. It's improved nothing. It hasn't led to better gameplay. That's where I stand on that. Christine signing out.